Lapu-Lapu was the maritime leader of Mactan, who orchestrated the first successful military resistance against a European global power in the Pacific. While history often remembers the explorers who sought to circle the globe, Lapu-Lapu remains the definitive figure who halted the vanguard of the Spanish Empire at the height of its expansion. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you, and let's get started. In the early 16th century, the archipelago of the central Visayas, known then as the region of Sugbo and the island of Matan, was a hub of maritime trade and decentralized local polities. In April 1521, a Spanish-funded expedition led by the Portuguese navigator Ferdinand Magellan arrived in Sugbo. Magellan established a strategic alliance with the local paramount chief, Raja Humabon, who accepted Spanish sovereignty and the Christian faith. However, this alliance required all neighboring chieftains to follow suit by paying tribute in the form of food and livestock. Lapu-Lapu, one of the two primary datus of Matan, emerged as the sole dissenter. When Magellan's messengers arrived with an ultimatum to acknowledge the Spanish king and the authority of the Sugbo Raja, Lapu-Lapu issued a formal refusal. He stated that he and his ancestors had never bowed to another and would not do so for a stranger. On the night of April 26, 1521, Magellan decided to settle the dispute through a demonstration of military force. He rejected the offer of Humabon's warriors to fight alongside him, choosing instead to lead 49 of his own men to Mactan at midnight. Magellan's strategy relied on the psychological impact of his artillery and the physical defense of European plate armor. However, Lapu-Lapu utilized the natural topography of the Matan shoreline to negate these advantages. The bay was shallow and choked with sharp coral reefs and rocks. When the Spanish ships arrived 3 hours before dawn, they found they could not anchor near the shore. The ship's heavy cannons, intended to provide covering fire, were positioned too far away to reach the settlement. At daybreak, the European forces were forced to leap into the water and wade more than 2 crossbow flights through thigh-high surf to reach the beach. This trek was physically exhausting and left the soldiers exposed. On the shore, Lapu-Lapu had organized a force of roughly 1,500 warriors divided into 3 wings, 1 to face the center and 2 to flank the invaders. The warriors of Mactan were equipped with kalisod, long wooden shields, campulon, heavy single-edged swords, and bamboo spears, tipped with fire-hardened points or iron. As the battle commenced, the defenders observed a critical vulnerability. While the Europeans' heads and torsos were encased in metal corselets and helmets, their legs remained completely unprotected. Following Lapu-Lapu's tactical direction, the warriors focused their projectile fire, arrows, stones, and spears, at the legs of the Spanish soldiers. The chaotic mobile skirmishing and the sheer volume of projectiles eventually overwhelmed the European formation. Magellan was struck in the right leg by a poisoned arrow and later wounded in the arm, preventing him from drawing his sword. As the Spanish attempted a disorganized retreat to the boats, the warriors of Mactan surrounded the commander in the knee-deep water. Magellan fell in the surf, and the expeditionary force was forced to abandon the shoreline, leaving their leader and several soldiers behind. The conclusion of the tactical engagement on the shores of Matan. The immediate aftermath shifted from the beach to the diplomatic corridors of the neighboring region of Sugbo. In the hours following the battle on April 27, 1521, the Spanish survivors retreated to their ships, leaving the body of Ferdinand Magellan in the possession of the warriors of Matan. The remaining commanders of the Spanish fleet, Duarte Barbosa and Juan Serrano, attempted to initiate a diplomatic recovery of their fallen leader. They sent a message to Lapu-Lapu through the merchants of Sugbo, offering a large quantity of merchandise, specifically iron and other trade goods, in exchange for the body of Magellan. Lapu-Lapu's response was a decisive rejection. He communicated that the body of the commander would not be surrendered for any price, stating that it would be kept as a memorial of their victory and the defense of their territory. This refusal served as a significant blow to Spanish morale and, more importantly, a signal to the surrounding local leaders that the technological and military superiority of the Europeans was not absolute. The victory at Matan triggered an immediate shift in the regional power dynamics. Raja Humabon, who had initially positioned himself as a subordinate ally to the Spanish crown in exchange for protection and trade dominance, observed the total defeat of the Spanish force. The perception of Spanish invincibility was shattered. Under the social structures of the 16th century Visayas, a leader's authority was tied to their ability to provide security and manifest strength. The failure of the Spanish to protect even their own commander delegitimized their presence in the eyes of the local nobility. On May 1, 1521, this tension culminated in a secondary conflict, often referred to as the Banquet of Sugbo. Humabon invited the remaining Spanish officers and crew to a celebratory feast, ostensibly to present them with jewels and gifts for the King of Spain before their departure. However, during the gathering, the local warriors turned on the guests. In the ensuing struggle, approximately 26 Europeans, including the new commanders Barbosa and Serrano, were killed or captured. The remaining crew of the expedition, now severely diminished in number, was forced to flee the waters of Sugbo. They were so short-staffed that they chose to burn one of their own ships, the Concepcion, as they lacked the men to sail it. This marked the complete collapse of the first Spanish attempt to establish a permanent foothold or a tribute system in the central archipelago. Following the departure of the Spanish fleet, Lapulapu disappears from the contemporary written historical record. There are no surviving primary documents from that era that record his later life, his administration of Mactan, or the circumstances of his death. Subsequent Spanish expeditions, such as those led by Loaiza, 1525, and Saavedra, 1527, found the region had reverted to its traditional political structures, with no mention of a unified resistance continuing under a single leader. Lapu-Lapu's historical footprint remains defined entirely by the successful 1521 defense of his island. The historical record of Lapu-Lapu concludes with the departure of the Victoria and the Trinidad from the archipelago, leaving behind a region that had successfully asserted its sovereignty against the first wave of European expansion. Standing against the tide of global empire, Lapu-Lapu remains a silent guardian of 16th century autonomy, a leader whose single decisive victory redefined the limits of early colonial expansion. Lapu-Lapu led his people to a historic victory. The battle became a defining moment in Philippines history, proving that Lapu-Lapu would never let anyone dictate the fate of his land. If you love this kind of story, hit subscribe button. Thank you for your support. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comment below. See you in the next one.